The big question, has the state of Israel made contact with aliens? Well, according to retired Israeli General Professor Chaim Eshed, the answer is yes. Eshed served as the head of Israel's space security program for nearly 30 years, and he says that Israel and the U.S. have both been dealing with aliens for years. Now, to clarify, this by no means refers to immigrants. Eshed is clarifying the existence of a so-called galactic federation, and the 87-year-old former space security chief told Israel's Ynet News that lots of agreements have been made between the aliens and the U.S. to try and research and understand the fabric of the universe. Well, apparently this has all been kept a secret because humanity isn't ready. And if true, it would coincide with U.S. President Donald Trump's creation of the Space Force as a fifth branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. Apparently, Trump knows about the aliens, too. But we have our correspondent Ariel Levin-Waldman joining us to break down the veracity of this report. So first of all, Ariel, give us a breakdown of the most shocking revelations that Israel's former space security chief has made here.
Well, you certainly covered the most shocking ones. The claim made by Professor Chaim Eshed is that we are not alone in the universe, and not only are we not alone, we're not even alone on our own planet. The claim is that we have been visited by extraterrestrial life who have set up a joint base of operations with the United States on Mars, buried beneath the surface. He also claims that astronauts from the United States have been to Mars and are working alongside the extraterrestrials at this Mars base. This in addition to the claims of a galactic federation, which, interestingly enough, echoes statements made in 2005 by former Canadian Defense Minister Paul Hellyer about visits by extraterrestrials to Earth as well. Very shocking statements, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof.
Right. Well, you mentioned he talks about the secret underground base on Mars where there are American and alien representatives. I mean, Eshed has a serious background. This is a serious guy. Should we be taking his revelations seriously?
In the absence of such extraordinary proof, it's very difficult to take any of these claims seriously, at least not at its face value. One of the things you have to look at is just the laws of physics making things very difficult given the sheer...
Have you heard about this conductive hearing system? These headphones don't go into your ears. These insane bone conductive headphones were designed by the military. And now the same technology is revolutionizing the tech market in the US. These special headphones don't go into your ears, but instead use a completely different revolutionary technology. It was invented by a US Army engineer who built it to give America...
What's up, guys? I'm Chris Lato, retired F-16 pilot turned UAP investigating YouTuber. I'm very proud of this video and feel very humbled and lucky to get a chance to talk with someone like Leslie Kean. She is just a titan in the field of unidentified aerial phenomena. We talked through her whole career, essentially starting back in 2000. She started in 2000.
Imagine a technology that can do 600 to 700 G-forces, that can fly at 13,000 miles an hour, that it can evade radar, and that can fly through air and water and possibly space. And oh, by the way, has no obvious signs of propulsion, no wings, no control surfaces, and yet still can defy the natural effects of Earth's gravity. That's precisely what we're seeing.
What? So, yeah, that was on 60 Minutes, which is just unbelievable. So I saw these videos, these 3 FLIR videos that came out, you know, the IR ones, and I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, just, you know, we've missed the pandemic, whatever, all this stuff. I just kind of looked at it and I was like, yeah, it's probably just something weird, some like weird like water humidity thing happening over there or something. But then I watched the Lex Fridman podcast with Lieutenant Commander David Fravor, and it's 3.5 hours, like the super long podcast, which is unbelievable. And he just goes into like exquisite detail on the Tic Tac encounter. So I recommend watching that, honestly, in its entirety. I don't know, for me it was very interesting because, you know, I was a fighter pilot for 18 years, just retired last year, and I don't know David Fravor personally, but I know him essentially. you know, he went to Top Gun school. He was the commander. From the 3.5 hour interview, he is what he says he is, actually. So his words and the language that he uses, I understand immediately. Like when he's talking about where he's looking and what he's seeing, the equipment he's using is very similar. So for me, I know exactly what he's looking at, what he's looking for. You know, I have not quite 2,000 hours. I didn't get to 2,000 hours. A little lazy, I guess. 1,850 hours in the F-16, which is a slightly different aircraft. But the Lightning AT is what we use. That is the targeting pod. So in this video, I'm going to go through the FLIR videos and analyze them from a fighter pilot perspective, and give you my take, and then what I think of this kind of crazy stuff going on. We're going to be in for a wild ride. Like I said, I didn't think it'd be this crazy, but this decade is going to be pretty crazy. So here we go. Let's get it going. On the 60 Minutes show, they show this video, which looks like about 2004 technology. It's basically the first Lightning pod. You know, it's not as good nearly as the next one that we'll see. So here, I think they're directed out there. So I'll go through basically this kind of targeting pod, first one, and then I'll explain kind of some videos what the targeting pod actually is, and then I'll go through the other two, and so it'll make a little bit more sense. So kind of just going around quickly, okay, so this is the flight path marker, so the plane is straight and level, okay? So when this turns, that's how you know that you're in a turn, so you maintain your spatial orientation. So this is your like target markers, okay, which looks kind of weird. The symbology in the targeting pod that they see in the jet is a little different because the software is written for F-18s made by Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Boeing. So F-16 is made by Lockheed Martin, so of course they have to have different technology, right? Different software. So the symbology is a little bit different and the capability is a little different, but the actual internal capability of the pod is not, okay? So what we see right here, the important things is it's in infrared. And right here it's white hot. You see down there it says WHT. If I get it right here, WHT, that means white. So white is hot. It's in black and white. So it's in the infrared spectrum actually. So the anything that's white will be hot in this case, and anything that's not as hot as that temperature, okay, will be black. So if something is the same temperature as its surroundings, you won't see it, right? It'll be effectively invisible. And that happens twice a day during thermal crossover, because the sun, right, heats up the buildings heat differently from the ground, and then when they change temperature, you actually get what's called a thermal crossover, so it makes it difficult for targeting pods. I digress. So here we go. So here's your flight path marker. And another key point, we're in infrared, and this is the SA dot, situational awareness dot. And what it shows me, okay, it's kind of a weird thing, but it shows that the targeting pod is looking straight out in front of the aircraft, and you know, slightly high, okay? But basically it's straight out in front, okay? And the other key thing that we don't get here is any range, okay? Normally you get range from radar. So we noticed before that they said radar evading, he says in a later video. And what I see here is there's no range indication, so which normally would be from a radar. So especially this close I would expect a radar. So the question is, what's it made out of? What's the material? Normally stuff reflects back radar energy, okay? But maybe they have radars turned off. I don't know. Maybe they have some weird rules of engagement. But anyway, we have no ranging information. Let's watch through a little bit more. Okay, they're at 20,000 feet. This B is some just terrible distraction. Okay, so you see it's still, it's white hot here. still right on in front. So he went to a narrow field of view. He zoomed in. Okay. So now he went to TV mode. Okay, this is television, optical. Okay, so depending what time of day it was, I'm not really sure. If it's at night, you're not going to be able to see it. So TV optical, this tells me that this was during the day, right? Unless this thing lights up. So if the thing lights up on its own, then you'll see it would be, if it was flashing, if there were lights on it, I would see flashing lights, you know, like going off. So I don't think it has any lights flashing or anything. So my guess is it's during the day. So the pilot should see this thing because it doesn't look like it's that far away. So he zoomed back out, okay. So another question I had is laser. Okay, this tells you if the laser's firing. So targeting pod has a laser. We'll go through in a little bit. It actually can blind you inside of 13 miles in the combat setting, so it's pretty strong. Normally we go into the training laser, but in none of these videos do I get any indications that we're shooting lasers at them, which I'm curious. Did we shoot lasers at them? That'd be one of my questions. And did they do anything? Did it like just bounce off? Because when we shoot lasers at targets, if you shoot a laser at it, do you get laser ranging, and will it shoot back and maybe attack? I don't know. So questionable. I'm curious what they did. What did these leaders do? Everyone, it's so funny, right? People are like, why didn't the leaders do anything? Why didn't they do this and that? But like, they're still normal people. Like, if someone came to you and told you this, one of your employees in the refrigerator found an alien thing, but it's gone. Would you believe them? And they took pictures of it. So I don't know. I think they just it's easy to disregard if you're a human. He's back to IR. Okay, and I believe this is the Mach 0.55. So they're not going fast. They're actually going slow. But then that end part, look at that. So 0.55 Mach is slow, man. For so F-16 at that altitude, we're basically going pretty slow. So right behind it, that's only like 260 knots maybe at 20,000 feet. I was never good at that math. So, he's basically kind of just following behind this thing. He's following behind it, just videoing it. I just wonder what he's thinking. I mean, I wonder what this pilot had to say, Sorry, pilot, if I get you in trouble. But hey, if you want to be on the show, pilot, and you can, then it'd be great to have you. This end part is so sweet. Watch this. Boom. What is that? A normal plane can't do that, right? But a normal plane, right? You see it from the back. You're gonna see the wings go like this, and then he's gonna use air. He's gonna use airflow over the wings. Bernoulli's principle. Okay, so we like push really fast and float through the air. Okay, these things do not seem to be doing that. Watch this. Okay, unless there's a cut there, but I don't think there is. I think he just zooms in, because it seemed like the thing was like zooming away. So he's in MFDV IR mode, goes to narrow field of mode, narrow, so that's just like a zoom in, okay? And this thing just goes that way. Wow, that's crazy. Like, stuff doesn't move like that in the air. This one is later, okay? I don't think we know actually when this one is, but I believe it's up the East Coast. This is the gimbal video. The first one was called the FLIR video. Okay, so this is a newer one. Okay, this is the newer targeting pod, and I'll just talk through this, and then we'll look through what this targeting pod looks like, so you can kind of understand. Okay, so here you have the flight path marker, right? And now this is the plane. You imagine you're looking at the plane from behind. So the horizon's like that. Okay, because you stay right when you turn a plane, you stay, and the world actually moves All right, before we go to this video, okay, let's show you what the targeting pod is. Yeah. It can see through a cloud. Okay, haven't seen the color imagery before. Okay, so I want to show you here. So the more advanced ones now, so you can see heat differences like this. Okay, so if someone's like, you know, smoking a cigarette or something, you know, you see it very clearly. So you can tell, right? Tires are going to be hot, right? This part of the ground is hot because that's where all the cars go, right? And then this is cooler. So this more than 25 air forces have these pods. So interesting to see if other countries have seen it. So this is a lightning pod, okay? So it has these several components, okay? It hangs on the side of the jet. But here I want to point out, like, you can see the propulsion here, right? The exhaust from the jet engine is much hotter. So we can see propulsion from the heat signatures here. This is a F-16. It's actually an F-18 in the videos, but basically it hangs on the side, I believe on the left side for an F-18. Just play more video games. And basically it shoots down, and it does have very strong laser, like I said, can blind. It's for using for ranging, okay? You can get accurate ranging, and you can also laser designate targets. So that is the laser shooting here. So I just want to show basically that same FLIR video. It's a different aircraft again. It is a F-15. What regular aircraft look like. I want to say basically you can see how they move. Okay, it's for what's it. So they're moving. It goes there, and then you see the momentum change, right? Then it changes, and now they go the other direction, and you can see obvious that the heat is coming from the jet engine, right, in the back. You can see the propulsion, and then they're just going that direction. Okay, so let's get on to the gimbal one. This one is awesome and so good. So it's 25,000 feet, just kind of following this thing around, not very fast, 0.58 Mach. They're going like 250 knots up at 25,000 feet, so not very fast, okay? And this thing's off their left side. So 54 degrees left, and 2 degrees and -2 degrees. It's white hot, so this thing is white, okay? And you'll see they go to black hot, so you can swap it. At least in the Viper, it's just like a little Temis, right? And then it swaps to black hot, which you'll see that they do, okay? Okay, 238. Yeah, I think it's probably the airspeed. Yeah.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. That's just insane. The ASA is a, I would say it's like they always have 3-letter acronyms, right? So it's probably aerial situational awareness, like display or something like that. We call them HSDs, horizontal situational display. And basically that gives all your radar information, okay? Or, you know, data link information. So it tells you where everything is, and they said there's a whole fleet of them, okay?
My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
So that's where they swapped. You see, now they went to black. So yeah, they're going 242 knots. And now just look, okay, so that is detailed, okay? So you can clearly see that, but it is the heat signature, okay? So you can see just like the jet, it looks like there's like heat coming out of here, but you can't really tell.
If you're a Washington homeowner, 2022 is your last chance to go solar. In December of
30 years ago today, KLAS aired a live interview with an anonymous man who made some really astonishing claims. He alleged that the U.S. military was secretly studying alien technology out in the Nevada desert near a base that is now very well known all over the world, Area 51.
A lot has changed in the decades since Bob Lazar first told this wild story. The Pentagon recently admitted that it really has been secretly studying UFOs, and then it wanted to figure out and duplicate that technology.
George Knapp looks back at that 1989 interview.
Guys were out in Utah, too, that the guys did, where they probably never see this. So we're going to zoom in just a little bit here, and you guys can see it slow-mo coming through there. and bam, it's gone. I mean,
Chief Day's attention. Clock position.
Who signed him out? Who
turns like.
This is Dave.
We all keep our phones safely stowed away when knowing how far away it is, but
They had on a
one. We have booster
modality where in the
that he demonstrated
paper you were saying that
and that goes back
people getting on board with it.
And to me that seemed reasonable. But he was never able to get into the AGU meeting, the American Geophysical Union meeting. He tried year after year and
across the very.
I saw in front of me was.
We're joined today by Dr. Kevin Knuth.
I'm presenting this as an application of really all you can do. And they noticed an anomalous round white object approaching from the west-southwest. This was near Austin, Texas. It stopped and hovered for about 9 minutes. And they first wanted to be sure it wasn't an aircraft. So Ray Stanford phoned Bergstrom Air Force Base command post and talked to them about it. They said they were aware of the object, but they couldn't identify it. And he asked them if it would be all right for him to aim his laser beam at it. And they felt it was okay to put the laser beam on it. So I don't think that would happen nowadays, but they did back then. So after speaking to Bergstrom Air Force Base, the object started moving quickly. Ray got into action. He focused the laser, forgot to turn on the video camera, and but basically was taking still photos with long exposures. So he has the photograph of the track of the UFO, and then you can see in this track, you see this little blast where the laser beam actually hits the UFO, where it flies past the laser beam, and he bounces the laser beam off of it. So it was a little helium neon laser, and so it amounts to a nice demonstration that this is a physical object. This isn't just some, ball lightning or something like this. And in talking to him about this, it was interesting. He remarked on how afterwards he thought, yeah, this really wasn't a smart thing to do. What if they thought this was, if we were being malicious in some way?
Well, now, if it's okay, and in the laser strike, I don't recall if you identified in the paper what the shape was, but one of the things that I wanted to ask about, there are some areas for me, because like yourself, I've read a great deal about this, especially recently, and I may end up going off questions a little bit, I should apologize, but there are a lot of things that just make my brain hurt, I guess, and one of them is, so part of it is we have a 75-year history of UFOs, right? And some really big events, the UFO sightings in 1952, which they said were atmospheric weather events, which may not have been in hindsight. So we have this enormous history, but we're only really seriously looking at the last few years. And so that one of the things that's difficult is there's almost like this dichotomy, which is understandable, but we have to reconcile at some point. And then the other part is when we're talking about UAPs, it seems like we're primarily focused on this the tic tac, the cylinder shape, as well as maybe these glowing orbs that have been involved with, but then there are also traditional flying saucers that have been reported, and the black triangles and many other shapes. Do you have any thoughts on which ones are, which ones are more real or which ones are kind of the official tic tac? I mean, obviously these cylinders are, but the variability, I guess, is what causes me a lot of confusion. Are some of these more likely to be real and the saucers are maybe more of a product of the imagination? I don't know.
Oh, these are all really good questions. there's many, the fact that we don't know what these things are and that some of them, or most of these events have prosaic explanations means that these things are lots of things, right? So I've seen several, and in fact, in the slides in that talk, I show pictures of UFOs that are actually birds. I point out how you can tell they're birds. So I've seen several pictures of birds that are thought to be UFOs, and so most objects that are seen that are called UFOs are identifiable and not interesting. So that's one of the first complications. So they are certainly not all interesting objects, or, as I called them, craft with impossible, capabilities. Some of them are, and interesting, and there is a diversity of shapes, and it's not clear what to make of that. And that my guess is there probably are a variety of shapes of craft, if these are craft, which I'm now tending to favor that hypothesis. If you just look on the highway, you've got a diverse array of craft, right? You've got motorcycles to semis to buses to motorhomes to Airstreamers, and so diversity is a natural thing, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was a diversity of craft. It would be probably more suspicious if they were all the same. When I think about it this way, the other possibility is, we haven't touched on the extraterrestrial hypothesis yet, and that's again only a hypothesis. But if that is a factor, these craft may not all be coming from the same source. Some of these craft could be made by people here on Earth. Some of these craft could be made by non-human intelligences on Earth or elsewhere, and there could be multiple sources, so we don't really know. You look up you see a plane up in the sky. It could be Southwest Airlines. It could be American Airlines. It could be Icelandic Air, or El Al or something. Yeah.
That's an excellent point. And one of the things in the online groups, and again, this leaves the realm of science and goes into UFO culture, which is very messy. But
very messy, yeah.
One of the things that when I'd ask this question, the response that I usually get is, well, obviously it's multiple alien species, and that for me, that's, I guess that compounds the difficulty, right? Because to be completely honest with you, right now, I'm trying to accept the fact that this may be first contact, right? Or, 75 years of first contact, because apparently we're slow learners.
Protracted.
But yeah, like yourself, I'm going through these different ideas and saying, well, it can't be this, it can't be that, it probably isn't this, and yeah, so you mentioned the extraterrestrial hypothesis. That's kind of where it leads me as well. But the struggle that I have is accepting the fact that these are real, honest to God space aliens is difficult enough. But then to compound that by saying, and again, this is what I'm hearing online, is the black triangles, if they're not ours, they're from, one planet, the saucers are from another. That I have real trouble.
Not necessarily true. We don't have any evidence that they're extraterrestrial to begin with, and how would any of us know how to tell whether they come from one planet or another planet? That's going to require sitting down and going through their technology to see how similar it is. And even if it's similar, it doesn't mean that you still won't be able to decide.
I guess that's all down the road stuff, really, way down the road.
It amounts to, I think, my on-the-fly explanation of not knowing which country the airplane comes from is probably a good analogy.
Well, and it's an excellent
You have to do a lot more work than just look at these things, look at a photo of a light in the sky.
Yeah, and I should apologize for jumping way ahead in terms of the goals of the SCU and the things that you guys have focused on, because you know, again, one of the things that separates you from this UFO mythology is that you're looking at what can be analyzed, right? Not what can be speculatively guessed about, you know, but then there for, I think for all of us, there is always this temptation to guess, you know. So now so you'd also mentioned that there were recorded observations showing that UAPs operate at low temperatures and exhibit red and blue shifts that might be similar to a warping of space-time. Do you think that these craft, I mean, assuming they're craft, are they doing some kind of a warp drive thing?
Well, that's been some of the suggestions, and that was one suggestion that Lou Elizondo had put out when he presented at the SCU meeting in 2017. So he had mentioned the Alcubierre warp drive, and let's see, I think it's Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis had done some work on, you know, for ATIP on talking about, you know, doing some of the mathematics of warp bubbles and seeing if you could do something with that with general relativity using Einstein's theory of relativity. So that's a potential, it's a hypothesis that's on the table of how these things might be flying. Again, it's complicated because you have, even in, I'll go to Star Trek because it's the easiest one. So consider the Star Trek Enterprise, right? You know, they have warp drive, but they also have impulse power, right? So sometimes they're flying with impulse power, sometimes they're flying with warp drive, and they can use either. So, you know, it's not clear that these craft are always using the same propulsion techniques, or that different objects are using all the same propulsion techniques. So it's difficult to speak in any generality here.
Well, that's interesting because you've also mentioned that, and I think this has been known in ufology, is strong magnetic fields are involved with UAPs, but not all of the time, right? And the same would be electrical disturbances. Sometimes they're common, but they're not universal. So
yeah, so there's a diversity of objects that we're trying to study here, and there's going to be very likely a diversity of explanations for their origins, for their, you know, what they're doing and how they behave or how they're engineered and all of this. And that makes the topic very complicated.
now, do you in addition to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, there is this idea that some, maybe all of these, if they are vehicles, could be some kind of US government black project, right? Area 51 kind of thing. Do you think that that's a possibility?
It is possible that some of them are. I don't think that all of them are. And there's a few reasons. I mean, the main reason why I don't feel that all of them are is because some of these sightings go back well into the 1800s and earlier. So that becomes problematic. I don't think we had any flying projects before the Wright brothers, so you have some problem there. And I think that's not well understood by a lot of people. And that article that I mentioned from earlier in the interview from the National Fishermen, they talked about several events that happened earlier than the 1960. And I think one of them that I really thought was interesting was this one in 1887, November of 1887.
The Great Airship Mystery, right?
Oh no,
oh. So you were talking about the 1887.
1887, right? So this article talks about a case in November of 1887, and It happened near Cape Race, Newfoundland. And it says another object was observed by an unknown ship. And this was actually reported in the magazine L'Astronomie. The object actually came out of the ocean, and they said it emerged to an altitude of 17 meters. It started moving against the wind and stopped close to the ship observing it, according to the log. And then it rushed away in the sky and disappeared. And it had been viewed for a period of 5 minutes. So there are similar cases, and way back, that's 1887. That's a long time ago.
And similar observed behavior too. That's also very interesting.
Similar observed behavior. Yeah, they have, and they talk about several other cases. They have another case from August 12th, 1910 in the south part of the China Sea. A bright wheel underwater spinning close to the surface was seen from the Dutch ship Valentine. So it was a fascinating article that, that really caught my attention when I was young. Oh, here's the earliest one on record that they could find was from ships was May 15th, 1879, when a ship called the Vulture sailing in the Persian Gulf sighted two giant luminous wheels spinning and slowly descending. They were seen for 35 minutes and had an estimated diameter of 40 meters.
So again, there's a lot of variability as well,
A lot of variability, and these sightings go back well into the 1800s. So it's difficult to believe that these aren't all a black project from the U.S. or from some other country.
Do you think that how difficult do you think that it would be to reconcile some of this? Because again, there is a history to this, as well as a cultural history, right? And again, that's very messy. But to reconcile that with what the military is currently seeing, it seems like at some point that'll have to at least be started, I guess. Do you think there's any way to do that, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know exactly how that will happen. I think once we start learning about what these things are, where they're from, and especially learning about their diversity, and why that is and what that means, then I think we'll be able to do a better job of putting things together and figuring out historically what some of these objects were.
Yeah.
I think it's going to give a lot more credence to a lot of these old sightings. Once you realize that these things are actually real, and you go back and realize that people have been seeing these for a long time, and there are reports, Roman reports of flying shields. So, and the Japanese called them flying umbrellas. So they've been around for a long time, quite probably.
Okay. Now, it is interesting also, we recently did the APEC conference, and Gary Stevenson did a presentation where he was mentioning UAPs. He'd said that the fact that the UAP went back to the combat assembly point, the cap point, and again, this is, I believe, the 2004 footage, indicates that they understand our transmissions, right? They can
Yeah, so if the whole thing is being spoofed, then whoever spoofed it, if the whole thing was a trick, they really know what was going on. But the whole cap point, I think in our paper we mentioned the cap point, the probability of them going back to the cap point is extremely small.
So that brings up another fact that this is, because then I guess, and this goes to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, do they understand our language or not? Lots of questions there, but really some things like that seem to indicate that they probably know just about all there is to know about us.
I would guess that if whoever was operating the Tic Tacs or in control of where that Tic Tac went next when it went to the cap point, whoever made that decision clearly knows not only our language, but they can easily unencrypt our military transmissions and all of this, which already is worrisome. But if they can do that and know our language, they probably know pretty much everything there is to know about us.
That was my thought. One of the things that I wondered when he mentioned that, the next thing my mind jumped to was, if you can do something like that, then it should be a piece of cake for them to like get online, right? And once you're online, you have access to all the world's information.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. It's kind of like the backwards of what happened in Independence Day, right? So instead of Jeff Goldblum going up and introducing a virus, they could actually do that to us. I never thought about that the other way around. It's funny.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so yeah, that does bring up a lot of big questions, you know. So, well, Kevin, I should thank you for your time again today. I should ask, what comes next for you in this area? What do you? I mean, I know you have a presentation coming up in the near future, right, for the SCU,
right.
But and we also have the D&I report, which I think we're all kind of waiting on. But what comes next in the short term?
Yes, I'm still working with UAPX, UAP Expeditions, and we are still planning on trying to collect data on UAPs. So we're still planning on going to Southern California at some point and trying to observe these things ourselves. I think that's got to happen at some point. I mean, scientists have to start looking to see them, and so and we have. David Mason, our engineer at UAPX, has several military-grade FLIR cameras that we are now using, just basically watching the skies at various points in the country, our backyards. So,
well, you have to start somewhere, right?
You have to start somewhere. So, and we've had some success, and actually, in one of the slides that is in the upcoming presentation, we have a UAP that David Mason filmed from Washington State, where basically that video is interesting because he actually captured it on 2 cameras, so you can rule out artifacts easily. And in one of the cameras, the UAP was following a jet airplane. So the jet airplane flies through the video first, and it's followed by the UAP, and you can see that the two look nothing alike. The jet airplane's hot, as you'd expect a machine to be, and these FLIR cameras can give you temperature, and the UAP is this trefoil shape. It looks like a 3-leaf clover, and it's cold. It's about 60 degrees below zero Fahrenheit, which is quite surprising. And actually, I don't think we got to that point about the Alcubierre and space-time warping. That hypothesis assumes that you're warping space-time to get anti-gravity. So if you're going to keep something aloft this way, then you'd expect there to be anti-gravity on the bottom and gravity on the top, something like that. And that would basically, the strong gravitational fields would basically Doppler shift the black body radiation coming off the craft. So the anti-gravity part would blue shift it, which would give you much higher frequencies. And some people have suggested that maybe this is why people are getting sunburned from being close to UFOs or having some kind of radiation exposures from X-rays because of these blue shifts. But the point that I make in our talk is that the UAPs that we've recorded with the FLIR cameras are actually cold. And so we don't see any of the blue shifting going on that one would expect to see from any space-time warping. So I don't think we see evidence of space-time warping yet.
Ah, okay.
That's really the point there. I don't think I make that very clear in the slides, and I'm probably going to edit them before the talk.
Wonderful. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. I sincerely appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for having me.
A rash of UFO sightings across Michigan in the mid-1960s launched investigations by the highest levels of government.